You're tuned into The Collective Voice, thought-provoking interviews co-hosted by young adults, fostering deep faith through courageous questions. Welcome to the conversation. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to The Collective Voice, the premier podcast of the 787 Collective. It's still
the
premier.
only podcast?
Premier and only podcast of the 787 Collective at Austin Seminary. I'm Reverend Phil Dickey, and grateful to be here as always with Cece. And Cece's going to introduce our guest today. But Cece, just remind folks who you are too, because that's important.
Reverend Cece, Slick Neck Saunier, say that 4 times fast and you get a prize.
I will not.
Try it.
Not gonna do it.
I'm Associate Director of Congregational Innovation. Glad to be with you. And I'm excited to introduce one of my friends from seminary. We have with us today Reverend Katie Jensen. She serves in a congregation in rural Iowa. But more importantly than that, we went to the seminary together at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago. Again, say that 4 times fast and you get a prize. Katie is creative, funny, wise. Someone I miss. So delighted to see her on the screen and get to hear about her life. Married to another seminary friend, Eric. So what I miss, Katie, can you share a little bit more about who you are?
Also, was it a seminary romance? Is that where y'all met at?
It was a seminary romance. Yes,
Nice.
we started seminary in fall of 2020. 0 out of 10 would recommend starting seminary in a pandemic. But yeah, moved to Chicago and then found out that all of our classes were going to be online. Didn't know anybody, so that was fun. But Eric and I and a couple of our other classmates were around the same age, also didn't know anybody, and so we made a little bubble. And the rest is history, I guess.
It's like a intense trauma bonding that brought you all together. Love that.
Yes,
good.
exactly.
That's
But it's
awesome.
worked out for the best. Yeah, I don't know much else that you missed there. That's pretty much me.
Will you tell us where exactly y'all are serving and living and what it's like for you? I know you did not grow up in a small or rural town, nor did you go to seminary in a small or rural town.
No. So, I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, a suburb of Des Moines, which, depending on where you're at, might sound like a small town, but it's not compared to Iowa. And so we're serving, I say we're in the nostril of Iowa. So, there's like the man in the middle of the United States. And so the nose is Iowa, and we kind of sit in the nostril. The tip of the nose is Clinton. And I'm in Andover, which is about 15 minutes from Clinton, away from the Mississippi. And we live in a town called Preston, where Eric serves, and that is about 15 minutes further. And so Preston is like 900 people, and Andover is like 99 people. So very, very different than Chicago, Des Moines, suburbs. So yeah, my church is surrounded by cornfields on 3 sides. If the wind is blowing one way, I smell the cows and can hear them when I come to church. And so it's very, very different than what I'm used to. But it's been such an adventure to learn about. I mean, the reality is that most of the state that I grew up in is like this, and it's just I haven't been exposed to it. Farming is back in my family, but like 2 generations ago, and then they moved to towns. So it's been a huge learning curve. And Eric grew up in Wichita, Kansas. So similarly, suburby area, very different. Only experience with farms would have been going to his grandparents' farm, but that was when, I think they sold it when he was like younger than 10. So just not a ton of experience with that either. And we never imagined it, but we've been there for a little over a year. Yeah, we started, our first worship was Ash Wednesday last year. So
Well, as a small town Missouri boy, I love that. Also, I'd never heard that analogy of the nose and the whole thing. So that, which again, being from just south of you in Missouri, I should have heard that at some point.
Well,
But
I will say, people say the nose, I say the nostril. Sometimes I refer to it as the booger, but that doesn't really sit as well with people. So I wouldn't say that's a common phrase.
fair enough. Fair enough. Would love to know what inspired this idea of let's go move to rural and embrace a rural church ministry. Was it just I won't assume. I'll let you answer that.
Yeah. So I guess another step along the way is we did our internships at two congregations in the Boston, Massachusetts area. So also not small town.
Also quite the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we did our internship on our fourth year of seminary. And so we were thinking about our first call while we were out there, and Boston, very far from the Midwest, and we absolutely loved it there. We really enjoyed the churches we were in, and being able to just go to so many different, seeing different landscapes. Like, you could go to mountains and then the beach all in, the span of a couple days of a trip and stuff. And so we're trying to think, where do we want to end up? And for me, I found it difficult to imagine being a plane ride away from my whole family. And I said I didn't need to be there for every single tiny thing, but I really wanted to be there for at least the medium-sized things. And so we decided that we were going to put Southeastern Iowa Synod. So the way that the call process works in our church or denomination is that you can kind of rank or make top priorities. And so we did Southeastern Iowa Synod, and then the larger Region 5, which would be the synods in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. And then put, I don't know the order after that. And then I think we put the Central State Synod, which would be Kansas and Missouri. And so we knew we were going to end up back in the Midwest. And we were assigned to Southeastern Iowa Synod. And when we kind of started looking at the churches here and working with the Synod, getting church profiles, it kind of started to sink in that, this is probably going to end in a smaller place than I imagined. And we went through the process with two churches that were not so much small town churches, and that didn't end up working out. And then we were handed these two profiles, and I remember feeling a lot of fear and just I don't know if I'm called to this. If you ask anyone that knew me 2 years ago, they would have said, yeah, Katie's going to end up in a city. She's going to end up somewhere, even across the world would probably be more likely. But the more I started to read the profile, and specifically for the church where I ended up, Faith, I started to see all of the things that were really important to them were the things that were really important to me, just tight-knit community and being together through just all the ups and downs of life, which that's what churches do. But the way that they spoke about it and the way they prioritized youth in their church and intergenerational ministry and stuff was what I had already named as really important to me. And I realized that it was more important for me to align in those things than to fit this image that I created of where I would end up years ago before actually understanding who I was as a minister, as a leader in the church. And then we also started thinking about the divisions in the world and how they're just getting deeper and deeper and more intense. And one of the only ways that I see that we're going to fix it is by getting to know each other. And so this was kind of an opportunity for Eric and I to take seriously like the call we feel to build bridges within our church and in the world. And yeah, so it was kind of it was a leap of faith in a lot of ways, because I just was scared that I wouldn't fit in with the rural life. And I don't in a lot of ways, but that's okay. Like, I've learned so much, and they've welcomed me in with open arms and answer all of my silly questions and tell me that they're not silly, even though I know they are. It's fun. So that was long-winded, but
No, it was good. It was really good. And there was a lot within that, I think, especially thinking about people who listen to this podcast, which are young adults, which are people in the church, which are people that care about the future of the church. I could hear easily a resonance of what it's like to wrestle with where you end up and where you want to end up, right? That thought of being a plane ride away from family and missing the big, the medium, and the small bits, right? And deciding that and making that faithful decision to be closer to family, and in a sense narrowing then what your possibilities are, right? Like, and that's something I resonate with a lot as someone who moved home, because as much as I love my time in Chicago, I love my friends that I met there, I love the city, Boston is home, Texas is home, and getting to see my nephew and now niece, who we'll meet in a couple weeks, getting to have dinner with my mom tonight for her birthday. Some of that's irreplaceable, right? And so I wonder, Katie, as you're thinking of this place that you have been planted, right? So much of church ministry can be being planted somewhere, right? Not necessarily going where you want to go, but going where God calls you. Can you share just about how that's impacted your life of faith? Thinking about the fact that you saw some of your values align with your congregation's values is really, I don't know, like tender for me, thinking about that. Beautiful in a way. And I also know being a pastor is different than being a community member, right? So
yeah.
there's a question in there somewhere. I didn't articulate it very well, but I feel like you can pick up what I'm putting down, right?
Yeah. No, I got that. I think I've learned a lot about kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe the like foundation of faith, and of like being connected to the larger, body of Christ and also creation, by being with people who are growing our food and are, raising the cattle that eventually will end up on my plate. And it's given me a perspective, I guess, of like kind of a reinvigorated perspective on what it means to be good stewards. I had this kind of miscommunication, or like language barrier almost, when I came in, and there was the stewardship committee, and I was like, okay, cool, talk about money. No, we're going to talk about the garden. And I was like, but this is the stewardship committee. What are we talking about here? And they're like, no, the stewardship is the stewardship of the land, stewardship of our resources, meaning like the garden plots we have on the side of the church, and our building and our playground, and how that's a hub for the community and all this stuff. And it kind of like, it's so simple, but it blew my mind. It took me like 6 months or even more to realize that we were just like talking about completely different things. And it's made me kind of understand like I said, the foundation of faith and our resources, and how we interact with not only each other, but with the world around us, is just like seeing things on kind of a smaller scale, and not just because it's a small place, but the relationships there are just like so deep and go back so far. And I'm just like having this image of like zooming in a little bit on just what it means to be the body of Christ in a place, and how that's more than just like interacting with each other, but it's interacting with the world around you, and taking care of the literal ground under your feet. And that's not something that I think about or thought about in the same way until ending up, like you said, like being planted somewhere. Like I feel the roots growing. And maybe, I mean, seminary is weird where you move around. At least I moved around from, like before seminary, I was living in Australia, and then I came home and saved my parents through the 6 months of the pandemic, then moved to Chicago, then moved to Boston, then moved back with my parents, then moved 3 hours away to the edge of Iowa. And it's just like so much moving back and forth. And it feels kind of just like like a deep breath, and like, okay, I can like firmly put my feet on the ground and like figure out what it means to be in a place. And that to me is deeply connected to my own faith and my own like view of God.
There's a lot there. I want to circle back to transitions at some point, because that's a whole lot of transitions, and just how you navigated those faithfully, right, as a person of faith. But I'm struck by this. You said talking about completely different things, right, which drew me back to your idea of the divisions that we're experiencing in our country, and if we're going to heal some of those divisions, just acknowledging that sometimes we talk and we aren't even communicating the same things when we think we're using the same language, but we're not meaning the same things by using the same words. So will you expound a little bit more on that, and how you're seeing like maybe some divisions being healed in that way of like even finding common language?
Yeah.
Maybe not common language, maybe it's common interpretation of language.
Yeah. It's a slow process, and I feel like it's really just now unfolding more in this like 1 year mark that I've hit. Because I think the first year was a lot of like just kind of trying to figure out, everything, trying to get to know, doing these initial introductions. And now I feel like we're kind of like getting to the deeper level of relationship. So I think that's part of it, is just like building a relationship. And when you don't know someone, you make a lot of assumptions, and that's not bad. We that's just human nature, right? And so by just like seeing someone 3 times instead of just like passing them by or seeing them on the news or something, allows you to start questioning the assumptions that are popping up. And I think in a lot of ways that's just now happening. So I don't have a lot of like concrete examples or anything, but Eric is another like layer to this is Eric is non-binary and uses he they pronouns, and I'm sure he would be more than fine with me sharing all of this. But that was another layer of ending up in a rural space of, are we going to like actually be physically safe in the parsonage, where everyone knows where we live and everyone knows everything about us. And something that Eric says a lot is the hope is that, now when there's a story about that, non-binary people are corrupting our children or something, people will think, well, but what about Pastor Eric? Pastor Eric loves our kids. They love Pastor Eric, and this just doesn't add up. And that's like a huge a huge hope, and obviously takes a lot of work and trust to be built. But I think, just opening ourselves up to, and I guess I'm using a lot of examples of like more conservative leaning people opening themselves up, but I mean myself as well. Like coming from a city, and like I thought I knew so much about what it meant to farm, what it meant to be in a small town, and I didn't know anything. And I still really don't. I keep saying that all the time. Like I'm not an expert by any means. Like you all are the experts, you all being my congregation. And I think I've just learned that, we will always be way more similar than we are different. And a lot of that lies in just like we're all scared of the same things. We're all excited about the same things. There might be like little different details, but there's way more common ground than we know. And the only way that we can learn that is by talking to each other.
And it seems like when we were kind of preparing for this, the invitation to join us on this podcast, one of the things you talked about is how your people have met you, right? How they have welcomed you. And specifically, navigating being in a small town, being in a very small town, serving in a place that's 99 people, living in a place that's 900 people. That is very different, right? And then doing so with a non-binary spouse, and also doing so as someone who has celiac disease, right? Like something that you and I had connection with in Chicago as you were just figuring that out, because my husband has celiac disease, and knowing that impacts how you can be healthy. And so we're wondering, like, what have you learned in your congregation? How I remember when I came to my congregation that I served previously, we asked, like, what gluten-free communion bread option do you have? And they said, we don't have any. And that's one of my husband's biggest pet peeves, is going to a congregation and feeling like they have not made space for him to take part in the sacrament because he can't eat it. And so immediately someone bought gluten-free bread, right? And stuck it in the freezer, and they figured out like how to warm it up and all that kind of stuff. But how have you noticed, like, have you navigated that in this area? And how have people navigated that with you? They might not have ever known what celiac disease is, right?
Yeah. And so this is, still relatively new for me. I was diagnosed 2 years ago on Maundy Thursday of my internship year. That was a wonderful day. I said it was the Last Supper and also my last gluten supper, which it wasn't even. I don't even remember what it was. Anyway, so I'm still getting to, or figuring it all out. But I love telling this story because it's just such a beautiful example of hospitality in my congregation. So I went to my first interview and they had cookies, and I said, "Oh, I can't have these, but thank you so much for bringing them, for offering them." And then eventually, when I was called, before I even got there, they ordered boxes and boxes of gluten-free wafers, and they made plans to get rid of the regular communion wafers that they had. And I was like, no, you don't have to just get rid of them. Like, we could still use them. It's okay. And then I said, I have this gluten-free, dairy-free bread recipe. Do you want to try it? And they immediately said yes. And now one person makes it every time we need it. And it's just really beautiful. When I first was diagnosed, I went to my supervisor the next day or the next week or something. And I told him, like, this is what's happening. And I know it doesn't sound like a big deal because it's just that I can't eat gluten. Like, there's so many worse things, but I'm really scared about what this means being a pastor, because I am going to be invited into people's homes for meals. I'm always going to have to start a conversation, almost always, if there's food around. I'm always going to have an initial conversation disclosing my medical history. And that's weird. And it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and it makes me feel like a burden. And, this was like right when I was diagnosed. And I've come a long way since then of learning to advocate for myself, and also understanding that it's not just not eating gluten. I think a lot of people don't realize that and Cece, you know this, the mental like tax that there is, and just constantly having to worry about if you're going to be included, or if you're going to have to leave, if you're going to be hungry, if you're going to get glutened, and then whatever happens, which is different for everyone. But I literally, if I eat gluten, I've got a number of symptoms and then joint pain for like 3 months afterwards. Like it's more than just like get a little sick. And so I was worried that it wouldn't be taken seriously, and that therefore people wouldn't take me seriously. But that has not happened at all. And I know that's not everyone's experience. Because I've definitely, there's people that I encounter that, I sit down and they're like, oh, this is why you're so skinny. You're not eating. And I'm like, well, I would if I could, but and so it's just a lot of you getting used to comments about my body and comments about other people's bodies, that is just exhausting. But overall, like, this congregation has really wrapped me up in care and love. And there are people whose grandkids either have celiac disease or can't have gluten for some other reason. And so every time there's food that I can eat. Sometimes I don't eat it, depending on who makes it and how sure they are. And I also have learned the line to say, to make people not feel bad that they made me food and I'm not eating it. And the response is just like, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself. I understand. And so I feel really, really fortunate. And yeah, I had a nightmare scenario when I was first diagnosed, and that's not what happened. Although there's obviously still challenges, because people don't want to invite me over for a meal and don't know what else to do. And so they don't invite me, which for social things, whatever. But I also want to come to your home to get to know you and be your pastor. So still navigating all of that, because there's just nowhere that I can eat around where I live. And most people don't want to get their pastor sick, which is good. But also I like tea, coffee. So and so people are learning, they're trying the best they can. And yeah. Again, long.
It's so much to navigate. And I can only imagine how hard it is in the setting that you live. We live in a big city, and Austin's learned to do gluten-free really well, and so we feel very privileged. But when we go out to eat in Spicewood, where I served, it was like, here's the restaurants we can go to with Mike. And when his parents would come, similarly. But I was always surprised at the parishioners who took the extra step to say, we want to have you and Mike over. What do we need to do to make it someplace he can eat? Or one parishioner always would leave something on my office desk, like a gluten-free donut recipe or a gluten-free pretzel tag that for me to make pretzels and Yeah, there's nothing like feeling the love when someone sees you and says, I want to make sure that you have space. Like, I want to make sure you can show up here, you can be filled here. There's nothing like it. And then the flip side, right? When you're not, and that space isn't created. I remember rushing home from a wedding with Mike when we were in college so that we could get somewhere before it closed so he could get dinner. Because the wedding that we went to, which was out in the hill country a little bit, didn't have anything he could eat. And so it's like, we need to leave at this time so that we can get to this restaurant before it closes by my parents' house so I can pick up some tacos. And I'm just so hungry. And he ate before, right? And he like had granola bars in his car. So, because he knew this was very likely to happen. Yeah, I resonate so much with what you're saying. And I'm sure someone listening out here will too. So thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for being vulnerable. I love that you said that. And then also what you said too of it's not just a hospitality thing. It is a hospitality thing, which is beautiful, but it's really a like seeing and embracing the fullness of a person, which is a whole nother level. And so, yes, it's hospitable to have, communion that's available to all people, right? Like that's why in the Methodist Church we do grape juice rather than wine, that's been a tenet from the United Methodist Church ever since the days that we were really trying to kick out all alcohol in general, which is another conversation. But there's really this aspect of it's a deeper seeing, a deeper knowing, and all that is built on this idea of trust and wanting to like truly love your neighbor in a way that like they see you and want to love you as their pastor and just as a neighbor in their community. And that's really, really beautiful. So thank you. And truly, thank you for your vulnerability to share all of that, like, and being willing to put it all out on the interwebs. You mentioned earlier this idea of roots, and I would love for you to expand also on this idea of roots. Cece just wrote a really great article on our Substack. This episode brought to you by Congregational Innovation Substack. We do have a Substack, but you remember Cece's nodding like, oh yeah, I remember this now. This idea of like soil, right? Like, and what am I explaining this? Cece, you want to highlight your article on soil?
I can. And it really comes from a conversation that we had in our directed study with one of our students, Avrish. So shout out to Avrish. Phil, we need to get Ryan and Avrish on this podcast before the end of the semester.
What are we doing? You're
okay. Right. Sorry. And she led this book discussion, and it started with a question of like, what is your soil? And I was talking about how I started gardening in my young old age. And mostly it's because my husband loves to garden and has no time to garden. So I'm thinking about the soil that like is under my fingernails a lot more than I'm used to, because now I'm tending to tomato plant and a melon plant and thinking about the ways that our soil is nourished and sometimes our soil's not. My husband's podcast episode had a very visceral reaction to weed killer being spread on his garden of faith. That's not what we're asking you, Katie, but that's what I remember from my Substack. Phil, I might be missing something.
No, I mean I think soil is a beautiful piece, but soil is one thing, but the roots that you were talking about, and again, you've been moving a bunch, and in every space, in some ways, your roots get uprooted. Like you get pulled and uprooted, and so now you're finding this place to land your feet. And I just would love to know more about like you're literally having a deeper connection with the stewardship of the land around you, right? And so, what is the ecological connection that you're getting from the people in your congregation, in your community, and how is that helping you to really understand the metaphorical roots that are being planted here as well?
That's a good question. I think the thing that's coming to mind is that it takes time and patience for roots to form, and it's not always convenient. There's not like a lot of control. That's one thing that I've been hearing a lot in a lot of the farmers and in talking about, from the weather. I mean, there's been some wild weather in the Midwest just the past 2 weeks. And there's a 90-some-year-old man in the congregation that came up to me on Sunday and asked if he could speak to the congregation sometime during the service about the tornado that hit Lena, Illinois, which is about, I want to say, an hour from Andover. And what he ended up talking about was the tornadoes throughout his life that went kind of around his farm, and how lucky he feels, and how just like overwhelmed by gratitude for the fact that he hasn't ever been devastated in that way through tornadoes. Like he's like, yeah, I lost a cattle shed, but you know, it could have been so much worse. And I was like, that sounds kind of bad. It sounds pretty bad. All to say, in that he's talking about like the lack of control and the way that you just kind of have to really rely on your faith and the people around you, and to just do what you can and then try and like let go of the rest. And I think that has to do with weather, with you know, the price of things, which is just like the thing on everybody's mind everywhere, but specifically with agriculture, just the price of fertilizer, of diesel, of then like what you sell your corn for or something. I'm probably using all the wrong terms.
No, I think those were all accurate.
Lovely. Okay. But there's just so much that you don't know and you can't control. And you just have to kind of wait and see. But as long as you have kind of like good practices, good support systems, good community behind you, like you can get through the ups and downs of not being able to control really anything at all. And I think that is true for so many things. And you can really see it when it comes to farming. Like you can see the fields that are doing well, and the fungus that took over last year and made the corn look like more brown than it normally does, which was causing a whole host of problems, I guess. And like you can see it in a way that is really beautiful, and also like has helped me reflect on the ways that building my own community, building my own roots, and feeling settled in a place like is not going to happen on my timeline. It's not going to happen quickly. And like, to be completely honest, do I have friends in my community? No. I have a wonderful church community, and I'm getting to know Eric's church community, but like that's not the same as having my own, right, like support system and stuff. But like little things are popping up, and connections are being made, and I'm just learning to take it one step at a time and to nurture the little, you know, I'm trying to think of a plant metaphor, the little sprouts that are coming up, and also like to find things that fulfill me, that I can do right now. Like there's a lot of, you know, like, okay, waiting until I get a job to do the hobbies I want to do, or like create the home I want to create, or travel. All that stuff is real. You need money to do this kind of stuff. But now I'm like, okay, yes, I would love a community of people to do fun things with and really be fulfilled by. But I also like can do things for myself where I'm at right now. And so that's like lots of hobbies. Eric is really getting into gardening. I'm doing all the crafty stuff. And that's been really fulfilling in a way that going from place to place to place, like I was always so busy with the transitions, and now things are slowing down, and I'm being able to like have time to find what fills me without relying on the busyness to distract me, I guess.
I wanna linger there, Katie. So for those listening, Katie and I met in seminary. I, on my honeymoon, actually spoke to Katie's incoming
Oh
class
my gosh.
uh, during her online orientation, and it kind of became like a joke between me and some of the people in Katie's class of like, yeah, we met you when you were literally on your honeymoon. As our honeymoon got cut, we got married in 2020, went out to the hill country here in Texas, had a little Airbnb, and my husband's law school decided to move up classes. So our honeymoon was a day and a half of a weekend, and then I like read while Mike was in Zoom class. And so when the seminary said, "Hey, do you want to speak to the incoming class and like welcome them?" I said, "Sure, why not?" Like Mike's gonna be in class anyways. But as seminary progressed, we got through the pandemic. I think Katie and I like met for a walk or something because we were both in uh, church fellows, right? Public church fellows. And
Yeah, I think
I don't
I
know.
interviewed you for a class. You had
Yes.
to
Yes.
do the like ethnography assignment, and normally you'd interview a stranger, and you were a stranger, but I couldn't just meet up with a stranger in the middle of the pandemic, so I picked you.
2020. And thanks be to God, truly. I've been like teary eyed on and off throughout this call because it's just like Phil asked a question about roots, and I think about our time at Holden with our community that was really like the community that I came out of seminary with. You're talking about Eric and like building a home together, making me emotional. But one of the things that Katie did out of the pandemic when we got back onto campus, like into classrooms, was create a crafting group where she said, I want to learn to crochet, and applied for a grant, like, micro grants through the seminary, bought yarn, bought crochet hooks and knitting needles, and in the basement at the seminary and like the student lounge, I guess, um, had a crafting space. And I had learned to knit in the pandemic, and I still knit, not anything complicated. And Katie learned to crochet, probably through YouTube. Like I learned to knit through YouTube. And now she's full on, like she was knitting her partner a blanket that had the phases of the moon because Eric loves astronomy and has started quilting. Like I saw that she made her first quilt, which my mother-in-law's a big quilter, and so I know how hard it is to do that. Like it is not easy at all. So can you tell us about these hobbies, Katie, and how they've almost impacted you as a person? You've There's a lingering grief, right, of the thought of like you to be a pastor and have friends is already hard enough anywhere. Our mutual friend Kyle lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, bigger city, and he himself struggles to make friends, right? One, universal experience, but two, intensified when there's just not as many people. So, how have these hobbies impacted you as a person and then also your life of faith?
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of people in their, mid to late 20s and early 30s and stuff, I hear a lot of people say, I have spent my whole life being so busy, so scheduled, and with no time to actually like develop anything that I enjoy. And that was definitely something when I talked about living in Australia before coming to seminary, and I did a year of service through a program called Young Adults in Global Mission, and that's through the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and YAGM is what we call it. So in the YAGM year, that was right after college. So I graduated college. I went home for like 2 months, and then moved to Australia. And so I went from like high school where I was in 1,000,001 activities. I don't know how I was standing. Wild. And then college, I like worked 2 jobs and also was in, 5 different clubs and also double majored. And so I was just busy, busy, busy. And then all of a sudden I go to Australia where I don't know anybody. I'm living in a host family where they have full-time jobs and I'm doing volunteer roles that are much shorter portions of the day. And I don't have anything to do. And so I had this realization of like, I need a hobby. I need something to do. So I started like drawing and painting and stuff. And that was fun. That was awesome. Really got the creative juices flowing. Definitely not skilled at that kind of stuff, but it was the process, right? And then when I came back home, I had to come home early because of the pandemic. And so I did a lot of like cleaning out my childhood spaces. And I found my crochet stuff from when I learned when I was like 12. My mom taught me. And it was like a ripple blanket that was like this big, because then I got bored and stopped. And so then when I went to seminary and realized that I was spending all my time on a screen and I needed something to do that wasn't on a screen after class was over. I like thought back to that and had developed a love of just like creating without being like really good at something while drawing and painting in Australia. And so started crocheting. And then I started knitting. And then I've done like needle felting, which was fun. I cannot do cross stitch, way too small. So just like collecting all of these fiber arts hobbies. And it was really fun to like teach people to crochet in seminary, but also very, very hard to teach someone to crochet in an hour every other week or something. But it's just been like so fulfilling for me to learn these hobbies, and not just because it gives me something to do that's not just staring at my phone or watching TV or something, even though a lot of times I'm watching TV in the background. But also it just like makes me feel connected to so many other people. Like when I found out that Cece knitted, I didn't knit at the time, but I was like, well, Cece knits, I bet I could learn how to knit, and it was shortly after that I, got some knitting needles and figured it out. And then I got to my congregation and there's all these amazing, amazing quilters. And I've seen like the quilts that Eric's grandmother has made, and just like so amazed by the artistry and the dedication. And so it like fulfills me in doing the activity and doing the project, but also makes me feel connected to other people and like part of something bigger. And I don't imagine that I will ever be an expert at any of these things, and I don't want to. It's just like the process of doing something with my hands, creating something, being able to share it with other people. Like I brought the quilt that I made to the women's group 2 weeks ago, and they lost their minds. I was like, don't look too close. It's not like I didn't know how to work a sewing machine 2 months ago, and they were just like over the moon, so excited, and asking me all these questions. And it just builds a connection, and yeah, really, really beautiful way to just like share a love of the process with other people. Yeah.
So the other project Cece and I work on is called Houses of Hope, and it's a rural church initiative that's doing just that, right? Trying to build hope in small town and rural congregations. In a lot of ways, you've already maybe answered this question, but I wonder if there's more specifics you want to add to it. In what ways has being a pastor to a small town rural congregation helped add hope to you for the future of the church? Or you personally, either one?
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest joy and thing that I've encountered in the past year. Like I feel so overwhelmed with hope when I look to my congregation. Especially, I mentioned kind of offhand that they're really dedicated to their kids. And that is just an understatement. Like, never in a million years did I think going to this little church surrounded by cornfields on three sides would there be like 20 kids in the Sunday school on the low weeks. And then they come into church and they're invited to play instruments and be loud and be themselves in a really beautiful way that like is so unique. I've never encountered a church that opens their arms so well to like meeting these kids where they're at, as kids that are messy and goofy and silly. And I think that's like the biggest thing that gives me hope. There's so often, this doom and gloom of the church is dying and kids don't want to be there. And yeah, but it's not doom and gloom. Like, there's just so much beauty happening. And like, what other space do you have great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and children all sitting together side by side and like talking to people on the opposite end of the age spectrum and just like the political spectrum, everything. Like, I just think that church is a space where people can come together like they can't anywhere else. And that's so important. And I think it's just a beautiful reflection of the way that the body of Christ works. I think that I'm experiencing it in a deeper and like more impactful way in this place that I didn't expect to be than I would have had I gone to like, a suburban church that I like already knew everything that I needed to know. There's just like a vulnerability there that has led to just so much hope, so much love and appreciation and connection and encouragement and all of the amazing words that you can think of. I feel very, very, very lucky. This congregation is just like, oh, so good.
Well, thank you, Katie, for your time today, probably on your day off, I'm guessing, and when you're with your parents, right? Like 3 hours away from home, and for sharing so vulnerably with us. Often we invite people onto the podcast to talk about faith transitions, belonging, and something else I don't remember. And like, that's what this whole conversation has been on, right? I hear this huge sense of belonging that you're encountering, even as you still seek out who you are beyond being a pastor, as a person of faith. So thanks for your witness. Thanks for your friendship. And thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice, the premier podcast of the 787 Collective. For more information, visit us at 787collective.org or find us on social media. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate us, and share a review. For when you do, you're tricking the algorithm for the common good.